What is your bullet ducking dodged moment? I once took a girl online out to dinner at a nicer place in our town. She was horrible to the server and actually got us kicked out because she called the manager a hunt. After that we were walking out and she wanted me to go back to her place to watch a movie, which I refused and went home. 2 months later I was reading the paper and saw her in the police blotter for assaulting her boyfriend with a golf club. I once went on a date with this guy who used the entire conversation to try and figure out how much I would be missed. The hairs on the back of my neck were tingling for the only time in my life as he asked me about every friend, family member, co-worker, roommate, how often I saw them, how long I would go between texting and calling. Needless to say, I suddenly had 5 overprotective older brothers who were pies and cops. Not me. But I had a hand in it. Knew this guy in high school peripherally. He was in the cool crowd of rocker type guys. And I was a nerd. New girl arrived at our school from another town. She and I became friends and a few months later she started dating him. At first she seemed cool. And we would talk about everything. At one point, however, she starts talking about how she has been hooking up with her ex-boyfriend behind cool guy's back. Just before the end of the school year, she tells me she is pregnant and that she knows it belongs to her ex-boyfriend. She is laughing and really proud of herself because cool guy is going to do the right thing. Withdraw his college application and go work at the local gas station to support her and the baby. Her ex, the father of the baby, is kind of a loser, so she thinks it's the best thing even that she can duck him while making cool guy support her. I didn't really know this guy that well, but I got his phone number from an acquaintance of mine who knew it. Cool guy knew I was friends with his girlfriend, but was still pretty surprised to hear from me. I told him all about her ploy and said, get a paternity test. It isn't yours. This guy was incredibly stoic, but after a sizable pause he just broke down crying for a few minutes. Then thanked me. They broke up. And cool guy went to college and made something of his life. My ex-boyfriend told me he was sterile. I started insisting on condoms anyway, just in case. Eventually I broke up with him. He currently has 2 kids with the girl he started dating after me. That would be really awkward if he was telling the truth and those kids aren't his. JS. When I was 7 I got lost in Spain without my family. I had been lost for about 5 hours. Really late at night and had been going down some dark alleyways and car parks. I started asking random strangers if they spoke English. But there were only middle-aged men walking around alone. One guy didn't speak English, but gave me a cuddle and took me back to his house around the corner. At this point I'm crying my eyes out and just appreciated the help and kindness. When I got to his house it turned out he had a family and the son was learning English in school. He got out his school workbook and asked me my name. Then they took me to the police station. My parents picked me up about 10 minutes later as they were driving around in a police car. That man could have been anyone. And I could have been kidnapped and never seen again. Not your ordinary bullet dodge. Before my wife and I met she had a single date with someone. The date went fine but she found him to be overbearing. He pulled his big dick out for her to touch as an example, so they didn't go out again. They remained friendly until 2 weeks later when he murdered his next date and set her on fire. He is now in prison for those who may want to know. Edit update. He shot and killed her in front of her kids and then set her house on fire. Sorry for my partial inaccuracy. Don't know if it's a dodge a bullet moment but it felt like I did. Afghanistan a few years ago. Having a smoke late at night with our local cultural advisor, LCA, and a bullet whistled right over our heads for my very first time. I looked at our LCA and asked him what the duck that was, and as he took another drag from his smoke. Unfazed. He said with a thick Pashtun accent, "You ducking idiot. That was a bullet. You should sit down with me before you get your head shot off by the next round." And well, what can I say? My LCA saved my life because as soon as I did sit my ass down on the Afghanistan dirt another bullet came whistling by. Thank you, Bilal. Back in the day, read. dial-up internet and expensive desktops, I downloaded a malware which asked for credit card details. I was young and didn't have a card, so contemplated nicking my dad's and putting in the details. I didn't want to get into trouble. Thing was, the malware was asking for payment in rubles. At that time, I had no idea what that was. Was it a different currency? Some other adult speak, so I came clean to my parents and they sorted the rest. They also deleted my LimeWire. The night of the Aurora Theater shooting in Colorado. Some friends and I had planned to go to the Aurora movie theater for Batman. As we are all huge Batman fans. One of my friends convinced us to go to a different theater that was closer to her since she couldn't get a ride. Couple people we were supposed to meet up with in Aurora were in the theater, but luckily got out unharmed. Guess that's a bullet dodged. I was talking to this girl at a party and I was really into her. I have some obscure interests and she was the first attractive girl I'd ever met with the same interests. Well, my brother swooped in and charmed her way more than my awkwardness could hope to. I was pissed at first that he stole her, but got over it after she lied about birth control, got pregnant, and tried to convince him to marry her. The thing is, I'm a lot more go with the flow than my brother is. If I had knocked her up and she told me we needed to get married, there's a good chance I would have done it. Then I'd be stuck with a person who I've learned is an absolute shit show of crazy. When I was about 23, I was asked on a date by a Brazilian girl who was maybe early 30s. We went on a date, but it wasn't the most interesting evening. We didn't really click and the language barrier meant we couldn't really get past basic conversation. I was a little resistant to go on a second date and felt it was fair game to say sorry I didn't think we clicked. Next time I saw her in person though I was berated with a bunch of insults hurled as she claimed we were supposed to get married and have kids and that I was the one. Very glad I was able to back away slowly and dodge that bullet. She wanted that green card. When I worked retail at Nike as a 17-year-old, I was approached by a Brazilian family asking if I would marry their daughter. I thought it was a joke and declined. I told my manager and he told me that he'd seen them before and they were after a green card. Really crushed on this girl. She rejected me. About a year later she had a baby with a guy. Turned out she'd been poking holes in the condoms because she was obsessed with having a baby. Was traveling to somewhere on a highway behind a logging truck. When we were going uphill, the truck changed lanes and a log slipped off. Bounced between the car I was in and another car, and rebounded off the highway into the nearby forest. There was no one immediately behind us. Edit, hit comment instead of edit. Screw it. My accidental edit is somewhere in the comments. Senior in high school, and a pair of twin girls with obvious behavioral issues got pretty aggressive with me to duck them both. They lived a block away so we rode the same school bus. I was getting a weird vibe and definitely had a this is too good to be true feeling from it. Every day on the bus ride home from school they tried to convince me to come over to their place. They were super trashy white chubby girls and I just didn't know how to handle it. So I basically avoided them until I got a car and started driving home instead of using the bus. Eventually after a month or so of stupid flirting and stalking, one of them got one of the other kids on the bus to hook up with them. He got them both pregnant. One with twins. They lied and said they were on the pill. Both of them wanted him to marry them. And it got really bitter and nasty between the two girls. Parents kicked them out. He was black and their parents weren't very happy. And then the dude had to bail on his college plans to support 3 kids and pay 2 women for child support at 18. They all got heavy into oxy and are in and out of jail. When I was back in high school, I was walking near the field when they were practicing their discus throw. One of the discus was wrongly thrown and was headed for my head. A friend who at that time was walking towards me saw this and yelled for me to duck. The discus went past my head and landed behind me. Then I realized that I could have died if my friend hadn't warned me. Imagine it, a kilogram flying disc lands right on your forehead. I almost fell for an MLM scam disguised as a secret business opportunity. Went on a date once with the photographer from my cousin's wedding. I was in the wedding party, so we spent much of the day chatting. He was good looking and amicable, so I figured why not. We went for coffee and it was perfectly pleasant. We chatted about the usual stuff. He told me more about his upcoming photo tour of Europe. Nothing unusual. But nothing special either. Got an awkward one-armed hug at the end and he said we'd get in touch when he was back. Which was about 4 months time. 4 months came and went and I just let it go. It had been pleasant but tepid and I guess I kind of forgot about it. Jump ahead a few years and I'm browsing the news and I see a familiar face. The photographer. Who is now in jail for an unprecedented collection of unique child porn. That he made. More of which, authorities guessed, was on the hard drive with military level encryption they'd seized that police still couldn't crack years later. That photography tour of Europe? Yeah. He was in Thailand. Cool. Cool. I had my police car pulled over off the side of this rural road. With the emergency lights on. I had stopped because there was a man splayed out in the middle of the asphalt. Turns out he was super drunk and decided to take a nap during his walk home. I had just helped him to his feet. And placed him in the back of the car to drive him home. When I hear an engine revving hard. I close the car door. And straightened up. Just in time to have my car smashed out from in front of me by a pickup truck. I felt the truck's side mirror clip my body armor. The driver was drunk. And had decided to go looking for his drunk friend. That friend was the guy I just picked up. The guy in the backseat survived the impact. Because those old Crown Victorias had massive trunks. The driver went to the hospital. And in the coming months, he pleaded guilty to impaired driving. I remember the collision analysis showed that the guy hit my car at 145 km/h. It was a wild night. And I still have major hang-ups when I have to stop my police car on roadways. Back when I was young and impressionable. Someone stopped me on the street and asked if I'd like to do a free personality test. After enthusiastically filling out the answers to a long list of probing questions. The person who'd approached me asked how old I was. Since I was under 18 they said they'd have to get a parent's permission to give me my results. They call my mum. Who tells them to stick their test up their ass, or words to that effect. Then proceeds to give me an extended talking to about trusting strange people with my personal information. And that's how I learned who the Church of Scientology were. Almost married a Marine and then found out 6 months later. He was court-martialed for getting wasted. Having sex right off base. And then went to wall. Yeah, he landed in jail. 2 of those 3 things are usually legal. Why was that part of the court-martial? Edit. Why is this getting so many responses? Reddit makes no sense. On temp job I'd made several hours of corrections on a long document saving version after version. When finished I deleted all the extra copies and emptied the trash only to realize the one copy I saved was the untouched original. It was a busy office but as my heart sank someone announced, "Everyone stop what you're doing. We just lost funding on the project. You'll be paid through the day but you're free to go. Never empty the trash." Edit typo. I had a type of bone cancer, Ewing sarcoma, when I was 10. It usually shows up in the bone itself. Which usually makes one lose whichever limb the bone is in. Mine, fortunately, started in the surrounding flesh and was working its way towards the bone. The tumor grew so fast that I only realized it when I bumped my leg against a rock that I should not have hit. The tumor was about the size of a softball. Because of finding it like this, we got to it early enough that it could be removed before it reached the bone. I still got 9 months of chemo to make sure it was all removed though. I kept my leg. Although I have a large scar on the outside of my left leg above the knee running to mid-thigh. And a large dip in the same area. Also have some kidney damage relating to the type of chemo they gave me. Although things are looking up there. This May I was 6 years cancer free. And I would have lost my leg if we would have caught it any later. Edit. Thanks to everyone that gave their congratulations. And my condolences to those who have lost someone to ES. I had a coworker who was an avid runner. He was really thin and in good shape. I ran into him in public with his family for the first time. He was with an obese woman who looked to be much older than him. After greeting him, I, stupidly, naively, was 2 seconds from saying, "And this must be your mom?" before he cut me off and said, "Silasks. Meet my wife Laura." Edit. Thanks for the upvotes. In my defense, it was around Christmas and I had heard he was having relatives visit. I was making a day trip in Colorado to do some sightseeing. It was just me and the dog. Driving a few hours over Wolf Creek Pass. I felt a little off and stopped up near the top of the pass to get some fresh air at a waterfall. I figured I was just sleepy in that altitude, so I decided to actually hike the mile round trip to the falls and wake up a bit. On the way back down the trail I had a seizure. If I'd not stopped I would have been coming down the pass when it happened. Saying bullet ducking dodge really downplays the seriousness of this situation. When I was in my early 20s I went out to the bar with some friends one night. My friend was DD and I was drinking. I had a very solid buzz going on when I bumped into someone I knew from HS who was clearly flirting with me. I ended up leaving my friends and catching a cab back to her apartment. The next morning I found out my friend who was supposed to DD got drunk then behind the wheel. He ended up getting into an accident and, while no one had any critical injuries, there were a few broken bones. etc. I could have very easily have been in that car. Instead I had sex with my now wife. Talk about fate. I ran out of fuel once. Normally, that wouldn't be so bad, but I was flying a Cessna 152 over the Mojave Desert at the time. It's really not a bad glider. I had to land on the highway. The landing went perfectly. The CHP pilot, with whom I was in communication during my unpowered descent, landed at the nearby airport and brought me 10 gallons of avgas. I climbed on the wing and dumped it in. The CHP blocked off both ends of the road for use as a runway and I took off into the sunset. Got dumped by my ex. Like a typical movie sad at the time, very antisocial dude, I was sad and depressed because I had been dumped. After all, I had been dumped for another man. So I did have a feeling of just not being good enough instead of being in a relationship that didn't work out. After a while she starts sending some messages. We talk a bit and suddenly we start fighting. She was the first one I had opened up to and told my thoughts deep down that I hid for everyone else, and she threw them back in my face in the most hurtful manner. I was shocked. When I reflected about it I realized she had been doing it during our relationship too. We'd have an argument. I'd present my points of view in a calm manner etc. And she'd just suddenly fling shit to wind me up. Later found out she also had lied to me about her age and was just barely legal when we hooked up. Treated myself to a nice pizza and a good bottle of scotch to celebrate the dodge bullet. Knocked my GF up. Was supportive and told her I'd take care of her and the baby. She decided we weren't ready, so got an abortion. A week later after that found out she had been cheating on me. Def the type to use said child as a weapon too.